Yule. Howdy everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this Oliver Tree album, Cowboy Tears. This is the second full-length LP from singer, songwriter, producer, multimedia artist, meme visionary, Oliver Tree. When it comes to the modern pop landscape, there are a few out there that are as absurdly funny and internet savvy as Oliver. Many were first introduced to Oliver through the ways his viral antics fused together with his throwback fusions of rap, rock, and electropop on early releases like his Alien Boy EP. And seeing his whole shtick evolve into what would eventually become his debut, Ugly is Beautiful, was something to behold. Even if the music itself wasn't nearly as weird as Oliver's bowl cuts and oversized Jenko jeans. But in this current album cycle, Oliver has reinvented himself. He's traded in that bowl cut for a long, beautiful blonde mullet and his Razor scooter for some cowboy boots and a hat, cause darn tootin' he's gone country. Which visually and narratively has been genuinely hilarious to watch. Seeing this album cycle unfold, I think, has been proof of Oliver's staying power, especially when it comes to his sense of humor and his ability to tease toward a record and get people into the story and the concept of an LP and an album cycle in general. But in my opinion, the music on this LP couldn't feel more out of line with this sudden country twist, cause I think this thing is barely a country album. Like, a bunch of semi-acoustic pop and rock cuts does not a country record make, which is kind of unfortunate given country's popular resurgence as of late. Its creative aspects and cliches couldn't be more ripe for parody right now. But Oliver doesn't really seem to engage with any of these elements on more than like a surface level, with mentions of cowboy tears and wagon wheels and outlawism. To me, this record feels more in line with, once again, Ugly is Beautiful, in that it further confirms Oliver's addiction to 90s nostalgia, which, again, if you're going that route, is a perfect segue into a genuine country record, because there were so many great country crossover hits from that time period, from Garth Brooks and Billy Ray Cyrus, Reba, Brooks and Dunn, Shania Twain. But like I said, a lot of these songs just kind of feel like throwback 90s singer-songwriter cuts with looped guitar lines and hip-hop influenced beats, which is a valid sound, a valid fusion, a valid era of popular music. It certainly doled out some good hits, and there are a few key cuts on this LP where I think Oliver sounds surprisingly comfortable in this aesthetic. Swing and a Miss, in my opinion, has one of the best choruses on this entire LP, and it's one of the few moments where I think Oliver vocally comes off more sweet than sour. There's also Suitcase Full of Cash, which, yeah, the production on this track isn't amazing. Those record scratches Oliver throws into the beat every once in a while sound like a stock sound effect, and that's, you know, not even to get into the general perks and guitar tones on this thing, which are pretty thin, generic, and flavorless. But still, this is one of the few moments on the LP where we have a solid tune, which also pairs with some kind of cartoony theatrics, which we expect from Oliver Tree and so many other aspects of his persona and his creative repertoire. I'm surprised it doesn't like turn up in his literal music as a creative device more often. But yeah, that also comes together with a generally agreeable message about greed and isolation, wealth hoarding, and what really matters in life. So yeah, there are some standouts on this record that I highly respect, but the vast majority of the time, I would say Oliver does this sound, does this style, little to no justice. Like the intro track, Cowboy Tears, which sounds almost like a Brit pop country fusion, but it's no Wonderwall, despite Oliver's best efforts here. And speaking of derivative, the closing track on this thing sounds like a really old Blink-182 demo with an awful sequenced drum beat and Tom DeLonge having a really off day vocally. Then there's pockets of the song Freaks and Geeks that reminds me of OMC's How Bizarre, which is a song I haven't had to think about in years, but I will say, Oliver in in almost equally masterful way, grafts together pieces of pop music, dance music, country music, and rap. But the downside on this track is just how painfully obnoxious the vocals are and the forced quirk all throughout the lyrics. I'm not like the other boys. Meanwhile, like, Oliver is literally one of the hardest working memers in showbiz, and, you know, there's not a more popular time than right now to be a weirdo. There are some other cuts on this LP where Oliver brings, I think, a more solid message lyrically, even if it isn't super detailed, but the delivery method to some degree is still kind of lacking. There's the song Doormat, which is all about being mistreated, walked all over, and being unwilling to take it anymore. But the bland guitar and beat combo just doesn't really do much instrumentally, and what are these vocal inflections? It's everybody's fault, but yeehaw. Oliver's voice just hits so flat and tangy, like room temperature orange juice. Yum. There's also Cigarettes, which is a genuinely worrying anthem about addiction, going into Oliver's struggles with chain smoking, his fear of death and cancer. But then in addition to that, you have the super tedious verse melodies, ba 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 ba, and that thin and kind of overly crunchy burst of drums and guitar on the chorus is about as exciting sonically as like a fake orgasm. Again, even when Oliver comes through with a likable song idea, on the instrumental side, something's just really lacking and basic and uninspired. It's like the music isn't taking as much of a priority as the memes. And that was kind of clear on Ugly is Beautiful too, but it feels like that's even more so the case for Cowboy Tears. I can't finish this video without addressing one of the worst tunes and performances on this LP, California, which is, it's unfortunate I have to bring this one up because it does feel like this is one of the more heartfelt tracks for Oliver, but the singing on this one is almost like tones and eye level of nails on a chalkboard. Like, I know and have known that Oliver has a somewhat nasal timbre, almost like, you know, a very hyped up Beastie Boy or a sheep endlessly bleeding. At least on past tracks, I feel like he's done a good job of making that work in his favor, but I don't think that's the case on Cowboy Tears. With these acoustic cuts, with these singer-songwriter cuts, no. Though I will say there's almost like a Daniel Johnston-esque quality in the initial moments of Get Well Soon, but once the full instrumental comes in and the beat drops and we're subjected to these like distorted, horrendous vocal sample chops in place of an actual chorus or something, like the magic of that is totally lost. Unfortunately, I just don't think this is like a very good record from Oliver. It's just not a pleasurable album or a fun album to listen to. Like, the instrumentals are dull. The singing is just very difficult to stomach. The songwriting and the production, again, like mega basic, not impressive in the least. I still generally respect Oliver as a creative force, like a really cool, neat, interesting online figure whose, again, antics always capture my attention to some degree, but like, man, if the music is just not continuing to lack some very vital basics, it's because of that I'm kind of feeling a light to decent 3 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Oliver Tree, forever.